Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Comfortable in deceit and the convenience of routine, most reject truth even when confronted by it. People do not like being told that they've been bamboozled, especially by those systems or people they have invested trust within. Few will latch on to anything that challenges or contradicts foundational belief, choosing to cling to false illusion, so long as either it is majority opinion or somebody they admire perpetuates lie. Fewer are even willing to embrace change, and having no real concern for truth, will not put forth the least bit of effort to its discovery. Most have tendency to lash out immediately against anything or anyone that challenges what they think they already know. Many disregard truth as meaningless until it affects them directly, and even then, it is a monumental task to change mindset, to embrace new perspective. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I'm honored to have as guest with me Kris Deleon, and she does a show on End Times Matrix News with my friend Tim Clark, and she's going to join us for the next 2 hours and cover all things esoteric. She's done a number of really incredible interviews with a lot of very well-respected and informative and well-diverse and well-knowledgeable people on a lot of incredible topics. And so we're going to pick her brain this evening and kind of talk about the things that have been intriguing us all as far as alternative truth and current events. And Kris, I don't know if you saw just recently, there was an attack in California where 14 people were killed and 17 people hurt, but it seems like, and I know probably you've been saying the same, but that all of the open borders and government sponsoring terrorists and all of that is coming home to roost now, and it's my opinion that we're going to be seeing more of that kind of thing happening in this country and others, because they want this kind of thing. I saw also that they're going door to door, and even after the Paris attacks, they were going door to door. And even if people did not want the military or the police to enter their home, they had no choice. They were basically forcing their way in and searching and, turning every corner to find whatever they were looking for. And it's my opinion also that they're going to be using that kind of thing as excuse to invade people's private properties and, private abodes. Kris, you there, sister?
Yes, I am.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
well, did you have a comment on what I?
Oh, yeah. And if you hear noise in the background, I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries.
I do. It is very evident that they do want to take our guns, and even Obama said the other day that he is planning on doing an executive order to do so. So I do believe that that is the purpose, to bring all, the refugees over here to turn, the United States of America eventually into a third world country type, where they could take full control in the New World Order. But I do see that coming. I do see the gun control coming. I see all the gun hoax, that are happening, and it seems like there's one every day now, and so, yeah, I think that's part of the plan, for the United Nations to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, the people that claim to be fighting the terrorists, that in large part, governments, shadow governments specifically, that they're funding them and that they utilize them as the boogeyman, whenever they need a jack in the box to pop its little head and make itself visible, that they can call up these fanatical whoever, whether it's Christians or Muslims or whatever fringe group they've trained and have
Yeah,
sponsored. For whatever country, there's always a different kind of terrorist, a different kind of definition to terror, but that they utilize that in order to further their agenda, whether it's to increase the budget for more radical martial law measures and give the police a greater power and authority and equipment for oppressing the people. And yeah, I think one of the things to get access to our guns, gun control, because we do have a well-armed citizenry, and there's increasing consciousness as far as knowledge of truth occurring, even though there's still so many that are asleep. Though it was only 5% of the population that even was involved in the Revolutionary War, and so we don't need everybody to wake up, and every person that gains knowledge and insight about what's really truly going on can make a really big and empowered difference. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you and I do what we do, in order to reach those that are seeking answer and to give guidance, to provide direction for those that are really inquisitive on these kind of things.
yeah. Well, my heart is into that, to tell the truth and to get people to wake up because God woke me up
Right.
and, shook me to the core. And I was literally sitting there going, what in the world is God trying to tell me? And so all these things started happening, crazy things in my life and just a lot of things. And I started searching for answers. And that's when I met Tim with End Times Matrix News. So actually, this is the third year that we've been doing radio shows. We've done a lot of radio shows, and then we did Google Hangouts, and then we met Anthony Patch. He became a part of our team for a little bit, and we had an incident to where our channel got shut down, and we had to do everything over again. And then, so we're still in touch with Anthony. He's a really good friend, and when he's not too busy, he's going to come back, and we're going to have some more discussions. But yeah, I mean, that's how it all started for me because, as someone that is a follower of Christ, someone who did, learn the word in church and then, doing evangelism and all those things. And then God literally wakes you up to other things. And you're like, wow, I thought I was already woke up, I was already saved and I thought I was already awake. But no, it was really a rude awakening to realize what was going on in the world because, first I started saying, okay, well, I heard the New World Order. What is that? How long has that been saying, who's been saying that and how long have they been saying it? And, what is the occult and what is the Jesuit and how is this tower built and who's the top elite? And, then I started researching everything, secret government projects, Montauk, Project Bluebeam, Majestic 12, Area 51. And, and I started putting all these things together and I said, well, how does this fit in the Bible? How does the Bible fit in with all of this that's going on? And it all comes down to bloodlines, DNA, and ancient history. And so I dug all the way back to as far as that I could. I'm sure that it goes way back farther, like you said, but I dug really far and started my research in ancient Egypt, and actually, I've read about Egypt for the last few years, pretty in depthly, and I have 200 charts and studied the bloodlines and actually uncovered a lot of people in the Bible and what their names actually are, and it's quite interesting. It makes a lot of sense because when you understand the symbolism of the UK and Scotland and America, and the bloodlines and Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, then you start to really put the puzzles together on what happened with the wars and who's who. It's a lot to consume. It's a lot to digest and to try to get all the pieces together. But I really loved your poem because it is hard for people to digest things and to wake up and to realize things from what they're used to being taught from the world. It's hard for people to do that and for people to believe things when they are used to believing a system their whole entire life. It's kind of like when the kids. I was a kid that my mom told me Santa Claus was real, and it was a lot of fun back then. But it sure was a bummer when she told me he wasn't. So it's like all these kids, they believe, and it's so fun, and it's just magic land, and it's kind of like how the world state is. It's all magic land. Everyone believes in these fairy tales pretty much, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but what I'm trying to make a point here that like myself, I wasn't awake, and I don't think that a lot of people are, but I think that God is waking people up, and I think that people are starting to realize that something's going on. And basically, because of the wars that are going on, the decisions that Obama's making, the executive orders that he's done, and we're looking at Syria right now, which is, we could go to World War III any day.
Right. Right, and the word talks about how Syria or Damascus will be a ruinous heap, and yeah, and as far as the gospel and the whole reason why I believe that it's totally divinely inspired is because of its prophetic nature, and that it's can foresee things and has written about things thousands of years in advance of they're actually happening, and there's no man that could do that kind of thing, and so it must be from the mind of God, and so
Right.
that's why I believe in its authority um, and studying and wanting to learn about the New World Order and the things that are occurring even now. The whole reason why I study it and research and even the extra biblical texts as well. But before we go into all of what we're going to be covering this evening, if you would give out, if you want to, share your
Mhm.
contact information, your website information, where people can go, your YouTube channel to support your work, to find your shows, and also a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah, our website is endtimesmatrixnews.com, and our YouTube is End Times Matrix News, and our Google Plus is End Times Matrix News also. So that's where we have our YouTube videos and stuff, and we post it on our website sometimes. And actually, Tim has his blog, which is TW Clark 66. If people want to read, he has a lot of good information on his blogs. And actually, that's how I found Tim a few years ago, was because when God woke me up, I actually found Tim's blog. And, being a follower of Christ and listening to the Lord's voice, and you meet someone and you realize, he has the Holy Spirit, he believes in the Lord. And this is someone I can talk to and communicate with. And I feel like God brought us together. I feel like he brought you together with us, and I feel like he brought Anthony together with us. I feel like he's doing these things because of the times that we're in. And and it's only by the hand of God that we're doing, what we're doing and what he's calling us to do. But that's our website and our YouTube there, and we can be contacted by our YouTube or our website too.
Okay, well, tell me, because my big awakening occurred during the events of 9/11 and researching all of that, and that led me to understand government sponsored terror and all of that. How did that affect you, and did you not initially look into it? You said it. I guess it's been recent that you um, have really started going down the rabbit holes, and that the Most High has led you to awakening on some of these topics.
Yeah, actually, during 9/11, I was working and I was on my way to my office and I started bawling. And I looked in my mirror and I said, "This is just stupid. What the heck am I crying for?" It was the weirdest thing. I never do that. And so I got to work and I was asking everybody what's going on because everybody was in the conference room. And I go in there and I said, "Wow," I couldn't believe it. I was in shock.
Right.
And I didn't start looking into anything back then. Maybe I was a little younger back then, and I had a young daughter, and worked two jobs, and I was so busy. I guess it just I was doing so much then, and it just didn't hit me yet. But actually, when I woke up was after the nukes were stolen. During that time, that's another thing I noticed, and then it Comet Ison, and I kept thinking, wow, I mean, we're going to get hit with wormwood someday. And, I didn't know what wormwood was then. I do know what it is now. But, could we possibly get hit by this comet? And I actually saw a meteorite go right before my eyes one night during the time I was waking up. It was pretty surreal. I mean, my daughter screamed and she asked me if it was an angel, because it was so close to us. And I said, no, it's a meteorite. It was pretty cool looking. But,
Wow.
that's about the time that I woke up. And yeah, I knew Tim then, and I texted him and I said, or emailed him and I said, "Hey, guess what I saw? I couldn't believe it," and so yeah, I had a lot of crazy events happen then, and it's just God is so good because He's always with us no matter what. I mean, He knows what He's doing. He knows that He's waking people up and He's preparing us for what is to come, and He knows everybody's heart. So that's about the time that I woke up and started researching, and I didn't know about the 2012 event that everybody was talking about back then with the Mayan calendar and the Hopi prophecy. And so I was like, well, what if the elite thought that that was going to happen? Maybe that's why they stole the nukes. Maybe that's why they started really hurrying and they were building all these underground bunkers, during that time. And they're still doing it every day. They have so many trucks going there every day building those underground bunkers. But that's around the time that I woke up was about that time.
Well, there's a lot. Even now, people are awakening to so many different facets, different aspects, and different sides of it. And so, but I know that
Yeah.
the last few years that you've done a lot of research and have quickly caught up because you're very knowledgeable on a lot of different things. And so we'll go into some of that. But can you talk about just some of the people? Because Anthony Patch, he was supposed to come on to the show with me here at Revolution Radio, but this was at that time that he was threatened and kind of backed off from doing stuff and being out in the public for a while. And so I'm glad to hear that things are settled down a little bit in that regard. And I know a lot of people were praying for him, so I'm glad that his life has taken on a semblance of peace and harmony again. So, and I do continue even now to pray for him in his word because he does cover such critical information, and there's a lot of people that are looking into CERN and with it being a Stargate and
Yeah.
connections to the Emerald Tablets and things like that. But can you talk about some of the people that you have interviewed and some of the more interesting things that you have learned, whether it's topic or current event?
Yeah, well, and I guess the main person would be Anthony. I've interviewed some pastors. Pastor D, I still email with him every now and then. He's in the UK, and he's a really good pastor, and he really shows a lot of crazy events of what kind of pastors are doing all over the world. Some really crazy stuff, you know. But yeah, Anthony Patch is actually one that I collaborate with because Anthony's very interested in my knowledge of Egypt and um, understanding how does it correspond with his research with CERN. And we've put a lot of pieces of the puzzle together over a long period of time, and we've done lots of shows with each other, and both of our knowledge from different facets have increased over time, understanding the symbolism and CERN and exactly what it is and why they're doing it. And he has a lot more knowledge on the side as far as understanding the physics and the science of it, and then some of the spiritual aspects of it, and then I do too, and with the ancient history, with what they did now then and versus what they're doing now, and how the star system changed during that time, and how they were aligned over the pyramids, and what happened during that time, before the flood, after the flood, and now at this present time, what they're doing is basically the same thing, you know. So I basically look at CERN as like a pyramid, but way more powerful than in all of the ones that are all over the world. And all the pyramids all over the world line up with Orion's belt, and Orion's belt is attached to Sirius. And Sirius is the dark star of Saturn, and Saturn is a sulfuric acid battery type planet, and it is a lead planet. And so lead, what they want to do is turn lead to gold, you know, fire up the sun. And that's what they worship is, you know, sun worship, you know, like the priest of On, you know, Thebes, you know, they were priest of Heliopolis, and they worship the sun. Like Joseph married Aneseth, and her father was a sun god priest, and they worship the sun. And there's a lot more to that story with her changing her god and all that throughout history, but that's just to kind of point out, you know, what they believed in. And then you have CERN that's built on top of Apollo's temple, and then we have a moon temple that is, you know, across the way in Israel, and it's a moon temple. So you have all these the sun and the moon. Some people worship sun gods, and some people worship moon, you know, moon gods. And then you have the Jews in Israel, and then you have the Muslims. It's a very confused, complex you know, thing to understand. And that's why there's so much war and, you know, fighting with everybody. But yeah, I mean, Anthony Patch is basically, you know, the main person that we've interviewed, and Tim has mostly done all the interviewing on our show. Basically, you know, he's done pre-recorded and stuff like that without me. So yeah, Anthony Patch is basically the main person that we've interviewed
Yeah.
about CERN.
Yeah. Well, what other kind of interesting topics or interesting people? Not just about CERN, but you know anything that you want to bring up. And just so you know, we're 3 minutes out from break.
Okay. You know, I guess, you know, um, I study you know, like the Sumerian gods, and, you know, and mythology, and how does that tie in with what these occultists believe, and stuff like that. You know, when I was doing my research, I wanted to know, well, who's who, and why is this god called this god in this culture, and why is it called this god in this culture? But now I understand. You know, now I understand why they do. And, there's different gods, but they're the same ones that they worship in India, Samaria, Egypt. They're all the same ones,
Right.
So I do in-depth studies uh, with original texts and documents and different things, everything that I can find across everything, 10 times before I even believe, okay, well, this is it. And it has to make sense. All the pieces have to go together to be able to make sense of these things with the different cultures and before the flood and after the flood and who is who.
So, in your study of the different pantheons of gods and goddesses from different cultures, um, are you finding that they are connecting back to like the fallen angels, the rebel angels, or the watchers, or are they tying together with like pre-flood, like the patriarchs of old? Um, are they people or are they fallen angels? Um, or are they both? Are you finding that the links between the names and their connections are, linking to both people and fallen angels?
Both,
Okay.
actually, because, with the bloodline of Ptah, which is Tubal Cain, and I'm Hotep is the lower self. And so, you're, as far as like, the gods that they're connected to, which is, part of the system of the planets. And, who they worship, and as far as who they are here in the flesh on earth, because in Egyptian text it says that the gods, they descend from Sirius, from the belt of Orion, and people all over the world could see them, coming down. And so, I am Hotep came from Egypt, and I did a video on that to show who he was, um, and what his name is in India and what his name is here, and how it's very confusing because it's like a split deity. There's a male and a female aspect of these deities, and how he came about. But
All right, hold on,
um,
Chris. We'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, Chris, I want to talk about, and I guess we can elaborate somewhat on the names since it has connection with the bloodlines. Well, first I
sure.
wanted to know kind of where you learned about the enmity between the bloodlines, because for a lot of people, they believe that the beginning of that occurred um, with the Watchers, mating with the daughters of man, and that the seed of the serpent began with the giants. But in my work, I
Yeah,
take
I
that
agree
back to the
with what your research is.
I take it back to Genesis 3:15. With what happened in the garden, and with Eve, the two bloodlines beginning there, with Cain being the scion of the serpent, the seed of the serpent, and Abel being that of the woman, and because he was murdered by his half brother, that Seth then propagated that particular bloodline. But if you would just kind of tell us about
Oh yeah,
your evolution on
yeah.
that thought.
Let me rewind. I skipping ahead there. So yeah, there was a fall with Satan and in the garden, and I do believe there's everything that I've researched. There's no way, and no way that the text and all of the history and everything that I've researched. There's no way that Cain can't be Lucifer's son. He is,
Right.
and so that's where it all started because through my research, and it's a very complex thing, but the simple way to say it is that there's an Ogdode and an Ennead, the gods that merged with the Hermopolis, and and Heliopolis, which is the sun temple, the moon temple, and the sun temple. And there were 8 deities, and this is kind of like what they would call the Big Bang with the egg. And it would be Mithraism, and I'm going to get more into that a little bit. It's just fascinating stuff, and I always have breakthroughs every now and then that just blow me away. But Cain, being the son, in my research, according to what I believe that he is Osiris, and he is the bloodline of Cain, and so that's, he's the god of the underworld. But the reason that I understand it this way is because Saturn was worshipped all over the world. He was the main deity that was worshipped. And you follow the first time that you see Mithraism in artifacts in Egypt is on their walls. There it is there, and I have a few clips from some very old books. I collect old books that I can find all over the world. I've spent good money on some books. I have been so lucky to download books from the 1600s on my computer, like tons of them. I've had to translate some of them because I don't understand Latin, and some of those books really have a lot of information about nature and DNA and all of those things. And then I have some about agriculture and what they understood then. And then, I've studied all the symbolism and all those things. But as far as what I understand about Saturn merging with Jupiter, and through my research, because after the fall and after the flood, with the Egyptians around this time, and I have dated these things based on many different levels and many different ways, and from every way that I can cross these things with dates that I am that I understand that the Ogdoad was around 2600 BC. I'm not saying that was the exact date, but I do think that when we look up dates online, there's a lot of false information, lots of false information that you have to dig through to put the pieces together. That the average person, they can't because they work, or they don't have time to research these things or care to. So actually, Amon was Jupiter, the resurrected Saturn in Egypt. So there was Sobek, which was Saturn. And I have some diagrams if you want me to send them to you to explain the Nun and Sobek and Apophis, and how, and the egg with the Ogdoad, and how Mute, and which is, there's different aspects of Isis and different aspects of these beings, because they're male and female. Fallen angels aren't just male or female. They're not either one. We see them as both, but they're not. They're a completely different makeup of DNA than we are. And we know that there's texts that say Cain is not like us. He was not like us. So he was a being from above and below. He had both DNA. And I'm sure that he looked quite different. Maybe he was a giant. I don't know. But so whenever Cain died, his Lamech, which was Tubal-Cain's father, Tubal-Cain had a sister a demon named Nama, and then he had 2 brothers that were twins, Jabal and Jabal. And so Lamech, he said that he could not see good, so Tubal-Cain guided his arrow and shot Cain. And at the same time, Lamech clapped his hands and Tubal-Cain died. So, this is, it's when we read the Bible, it's basically a lot more to it. And just like Jesus said, not everyone's going to understand the Bible or the prophecies. You have to, take on the right heart and let God show you the truth through these things. But going through the Egyptians and the triads, knowing what city they came from, what cities did they come from, what gods did they worship, who do they represent, what bloodlines are they, who was really King David and Joseph and all of these people, and how does it connect with the Bible? And so then I realized that the connection with the planets, with Venus, and Venus like being the twin of Saturn, because if you know the story of Osiris and Set, which is another one of his counterparts, sacrificed him, and so we see the bull sacrifice everywhere. And in Mithricism, you see the bull being stabbed, and you see the sun and the moon, the moon in one corner, and the sun in another. And when you go back even before then to the Nikeda, and even before then you start to realize, okay, well, these gods pretty much passed the torch, and they're then you put all of them together and know how they connect with each other. But when you look at Mithra is being stabbed, and you see the dog licking the womb, and you see the snake, and you see the crab, all of those things are very symbolic. Just like the unicorn, the hunt for the unicorn stab, the dog licks the wound. Well, all of those things are actually stars in the sky that mean, and I know we're not supposed to worship the moon and the sun and the stars, and I do not do that, and I do not study astrology for wrong purposes. What I do is I look at things to try to understand things, to try to understand why one star. So the dog Canis Minor is Nephthys, and she's the healer, and that's why you see the dog licking the womb of the bull of Taurus, which is Osiris, and then he becomes the unicorn, as Horus in the star system. And it's in that unicorn is Monoceros. It's in the inside of the winter triangle on December 25th, of every year. So that's just an interesting tie-in that I've made recently, and I'm studying the hunt of the unicorn and how the Rockefellers, they made a video about, they call it the Christ, which I do not believe that it is our Christ. I don't believe that it represents that. I do believe that there is a lot of symbology in the Bible that represents maybe the same creature, but it's not necessarily the one that we see in the sky, So basically, Cain, if he is Osiris and he was killed, and then he was resurrected again in the underworld, and then Tubal-Cain represents that same bloodline, because we know the Freemasons worship Tubal-Cain. They say that he is their creator God. And the reason they say that is because of his blood, because of his bloodline, because he's the same bloodline of Cain. Right. And then when you start to get into understanding the Hotep, aspect of Ptah, and how some of the Egyptians believed in a different system, and then some believed in this system with Ptah, and then you get Akhenaten that only worships Aten. And so it's a lot of hidden stuff, but then you can start to understand it as you research, like me. I research and things come out in the research. But Amon, it represents Jupiter. It is part of the Ogdoad. He is part of the Ogdoad. He has a son named Khonsu that represents the leg of the bull, which represents the sickle and Ursa Major. And I don't want to get people too far off into this stuff here, but what I wanted to make a point of is that this bloodline is the reason why that we're in the wars that we're in now, with the split in these bloodlines. And going back to Imhotep, he did come from India. And I actually have a book that I linked to. It was very hard to find. It is scrubbed everywhere, and you cannot buy it. It's a very old book. And I put the link to one of my videos that I did. I'm sorry, I don't know the title right offhand. It's one of the Eye of Ra videos that I did. But Imhotep has the U's on his arms, and he has the I forget how you say that word, but the Indian Vajnavite on his head with a U symbol. And these artifacts were all over, where the Vatican took all of them and hid them. He didn't want anyone to know that Imhotep had these symbols on his body. but there are statues that have been stolen. You can find pictures of them, and so he came from India, and actually, it's a he/she. Imhotep is the mother-in-law of Ham's wife, and so Ham represented Set and Horus both. So some of the Egyptians only recognize Horus, and some only recognize Set, and then some recognize Set and Horus. And I do believe that's what's going on right now with CERN. With the recognizing the two god, the two fractions, and bringing in the Antichrist, once and for all, during this time. But Imhotep's name in India is Lord Ayappa, Ayappa, and he's from Kerala. And in ancient texts, it said that he did have 12-strand DNA, and that he was an astrologer, and he knew that, the Indian form of medicine and stuff like that. So that's where you get Imhotep and tied to Ham and all of those things after the flood, because Ham became the pharaoh, and the stretching of the cord ceremony with the stars was for the first time with Ham after the flood. His name is Kasakimwe, and you can translate his name in Hebrew. So when I translate these names, I make sure that they are correct. I don't just go and say, oh, well, I think that's him, I'm just going to say that. I actually go in and I make sure that I verify everything, I translate all, names all the time and symbols to try to understand, because we don't understand a lot of things because we speak this language here, and the Sanskrit and the languages way back then, they were like sound. That's how they got their alphabet. That's how they ascended, and that's where they got their words and everything back then. And there's no way that we could understand, that language. But that's where Imhotep came, and it does get confusing. The U on his arm is reference to Jupiter, and he's actually a fusion with Shiva and Vishnu. And that's from my research. It's called Hari Hara, which both of those names split within to those two deities. That's why you see a lot of pictures of Shiva and Vishnu. Vishnu is Jupiter. That's what it means in Rome. It means Vishnu is translated to Jupiter, and so Shiva is kind of like Venus, but it's also with a male aspect, and Brahma represents Saturn. So it's very confusing after the flood with how they piece things back together with Jupiter and the four souls of Horus and the North Star, and how they're opening this gate with CERN. And that's something that Tim is working on. He has a book that he's almost done with. It's called Cernunnos's Box, and it talks about the gods of CERN, and it explains how they transitioned in their pathways with the dead souls. And then it also, we're working on the hardest pieces of it that I've studied with the star system, with opening up the portal, because those are some heavy things that I've pieced together with the goddess Seshat, which is a female aspect of Thoth, and which is the pole star, which represents Juno. It's very confusing, but those are the pieces that I put together. And hopefully we can explain this in our booklets a little bit better. And they're going to be short
it's
booklets.
a lot of information, so
Yeah.
yeah, I can see how it would be difficult to keep up with. But in just to elaborate a little bit further on CERN for those that have not done a lot of research, which I include myself on this, can you elaborate a little bit on what you think, the purpose? What are they trying to do, and what, as far as the, because there's always that, as as above, so below in the Masonic and the Illuminist think system, as far as even Aleister Crowley and all of that. And so, what star system is it pointed towards Sirius? I mean, where are they trying to, is it like a Stargate type of thing that you open a portal here and it opens somewhere else on the other side? And where might that be? Or if you do have an answer for that.
Yeah, well, CERN has said out of their own mouth that they want to open up parallel dimensions.
Right.
And I know they're not going to tell us everything on the surface what they're doing. What Anthony was, what they visited him for was talking about the quantum computer. So the quantum computer is part of CERN. It is connected to CERN, and it is an AI computer. You can merge anything in that computer and then control things with it, like control nature, control things that you can create. So this computer is tied to CERN, and what they're wanting to do, I think that what they're wanting to do is open up not just one gate, but many gates. I think that they're trying to open up a portal. Like Anthony said, they're trying to connect the Birkeland currents to Saturn. Because Saturn is a sulfuric acid battery, and I've studied and looked into alchemy and and the gold aspect of it and what is gold. And actually in the Bible, gold is the mark of the beast. If you look up the word gold in Strong's and you study it with the exhaustive concordance, it says that gold is to be stained and it is a mark. And Anthony's patch has a video out there if you want to look it up. It talks about third strand DNA and the gold. Anyone can find that video, but
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. And actually, when we come back from the next break, I want to elaborate on that somewhat as well. But please continue with what you were commenting on.
okay. Yeah, so they do want to open up another dimension. So CERN is colder than space and hotter than the sun. Can you imagine that? With these particles colliding. I have translated the particles that they put into the quantum computer in CERN, which is phosphorus, muons, which is in translation to Venus, and so I've translated all of these words to understand the electrons. Negative electron is if you look up busos in Greek on the Strongs, it will tell you in the Bible concordance that it is a negative electron. A negative electron is, if you think of it as in the center of something, of energy. And so CERN is building up strangelets, and strangelets, Anthony calls the cousin to the black hole. And what they do is it's not going to be a black hole that can suck in, but they're going towards the center of the earth where all the energy is, where all the core is in the center. And CERN has put in iron, which Mars is made out of iron. It's like an alchemy machine, Stargate key. So they put in iron, and now they're doing ions of lead. Saturn is made out of lead, and the goal is lead to gold. So they want to basically do an ascension, is what I'm thinking in my mind. It's not like a regular ascension where I've never done ascension, but I understand what it is. And like King Tut, he ascended, and in the artifacts with his artifact, you see the lotus flower at the bottom, which represents the seventh chakra, and then it has the scarab that represents the eighth, and then it has the moon, which represents the ninth. And so his artifacts, represent the ascension that he's going through. And when they do the leg of the bull ceremony, they're doing.
Hold on, Chris. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I have as guests with me this evening Kris Deleon And she's from End Times Matrix News, and we're going to be covering all things esoteric even in this next hour. But before we continue, I do want to remind everybody quickly that Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported, commercial-free and corporate-free radio network on the internet and on the earth, and that we do need your support in order to continue coming to you in the way that we do. So those of you that can afford to, please do go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button, or purchase one of the items that are available in order to garner your support, whether it's the non-GMO seed pack or the bullet drive with all the critical emergency information which you might need in case of an EMP blast or martial law, anything of that nature. And know in advance that we appreciate you not only for your dialogue and your fellowship, but for supporting us in the way that you do. And I know that all of the other hosts coming to you on Studio A and Studio B also appreciate you as much as I do personally. Thank you all, and appreciate you so very much. All right, Kris, I wanted to read something and share this with you real quick, and then we'll go into some of this third strand DNA information. This is from the bonus edition from my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, which is a new addition to which I thought the information was critical, so I added it to the reprint. But it says this, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the portion which I think will be relevant to our discourse. It says, in his notes, my friend penned some personal thoughts after having considered his observations and the source of his DNA materials. On the plane ride back stateside, my friend, who at the time was one of the most knowledgeable DNA researchers on the planet, pulled out the biggest piece of mental jerky I've ever gnawed on. His benefactor, test subject, believed that while most of the sons of Adam had double-strand DNA, he had been told by his family that he and his blood relatives were distinctly different and that he, like his father before him, had triple-strand DNA. He wanted my friend to secretly prove once and for all if this was true or not. The subject claimed that his extended family and their cousins, who are kings, queens, princes, and princesses, as well as leaders of industry and banking worldwide, believe they are children of an otherworldly race of humanoid beings. He'd been taught by his tutors that once upon a time his ancestors had fallen to earth after some cosmic calamity in the time before the garden. He believed while their ancestral mother was Eve, their ancestral father was not Adam. He was torn to know if a child of Cain was actually genetically different and whether he could be saved. He thought of the Vatican's pronouncement that the aliens are our cousins and the Vishnu teachings of a time when gods flew in spaceships and destroyed whole cities in a single blast. He even had notes about Elijah being caught up in a chariot of fire. Maybe he had misread or misunderstood the entire history of his Bible. Maybe from Genesis to Revelation, it was about some faraway, more tangible, and real fallen angel and alien cousins than the ghost-like destroying angels he'd always pictured in his imagination. One more part, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with this quote or not, but this will bring it home. Our subject and his kin had been taught by their families and their tutors that their ancestors had fallen to earth after this grand cosmic calamity, and that his ancestors were humanoid cousins, superior hybrids, half alien and only half human. They once reigned from Olympus and were pharaohs. Whatever the real truth of their history, their belief was the driver of their actions. Being the true believers they are, they will continue to operate in accordance with their belief in the laws of alien Darwinian type survival. That's why they interbreed to maintain the purity of the bloodline. That's why they secretly meet and connive to pass power between themselves. And that's why they must fool the rest of mankind into wars of self destruction and debt, so that we may be forever enslaved to their lust on this prison planet till death do us part. More than afraid, they know in their hearts this is a fight for survival. It had begun, just as my friend had said, as a murder investigation, starting with the first murderer, when that Luciferian demon dad had first whispered of the evil deed to his willing child Cain. It continued down through time, the sons of Adam fighting for survival and destroying the alien giants in Canaan land, David and the hybrid Goliath and his four hybrid brothers, and all the hidden true believers since, hiding in plain sight. So powerful and so important, but yet so afraid. These earthbound half cousins of ours continue to laugh, but it is a nervous laugh at that, as they have a joke or two at our expense, recreating their lying father's fall to earth and flashing their heretofore secret gang signs to each other right in our face. I know now how dangerous their beliefs are, because they are being driven by their beliefs, taught to them by their real alleged father, the father of lies. And even now he knows the truth and whispers in his initiate's ears, just as he did in Cain's ear. The sons of Adam, as long as they live, are dangerous. Comment?
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and it made me think about all the celebrities flashing the signs and,
Right,
all the presidents and, all the people that are doing that because they do listen to their father. They listen to
right,
who they want to follow because they don't accept Jesus Christ. So they don't hear our Lord's voice. They hear someone else's voice, and they're learning from that path, which is the wide road. And that's why a lot of these celebrities, they even say it. I sold my soul to the devil because I wanted fame, I wanted fortune, I wanted all these things. And so and they understand a lot of things about the cult that the regular person doesn't understand about the fallen angels and the bloodlines. And it's and what it really boils down to, what it really everything that I boil it down to is quantum entanglement. That is the mind of Lucifer, and that is what CERN is. CERN is this machine that is connecting to Saturn, and it's basically, when you look at the Washington Monument and you see the two circles, the Vesica Pisces and the obelisk in the center, that's quantum entanglement. And so quantum entanglement is like an enlightened state that people want to get to in their mind. And that is what Lucifer did in the Garden of Eden. Is that Jesus wants our heart. Well, Lucifer says, if I got your mind, I got you. I got all of you. That's, he tempts everyone. That's how he tempted them in the garden. But that was excellent. It made me want to keep hearing what else you wrote down there.
yeah, I'll send it to you. The whole story. It's a
Oh, I'd
fascinating.
love that.
Yeah, it's quite lengthy, and it'll give you great detail into this whole third strand DNA. But that was the point that I wanted to kind of pick up on, and we'll continue on. With wherever it is that you would like to and
Well,
want
I
to
pulled up
go.
one of my notepads on what I wrote in deep thinking about CERN in my studies. And basically, I wrote CERN is a stargate. Saturn is a sulfuric acid battery. CERN admits to wanting to open up parallel dimensions. This is where the Titans are in Tartarus.
Hmm.
Saturn is Tartarus. The Birkeland currents will charge the battery and open a portal. When demons are released in Revelation 9, it says a sulfuric fire comes out of their
Yes.
mouth. And they harm those not sealed by God. Then afterwards, the four angels chained and under the Euphrates will be released. And this is where Syria is, where the war is. When the fifth trumpet blows, the sea swells as it is the abyss below connected to above. The sun god and the moon god are like interchangeable gluons. One can be the other. Muons are Venus. They are in the quantum computer in CERN, inside CERN. So they have muons that represent Venus. They have, the iron represents Mars, the lead represents Saturn. And abusos, like I said in Greeks and the Strongs, it's a negative electron in the center. And they don't really actually know what's inside of it. They don't understand. The electron is the abyss, the negative electron. There's different parts of an electron, by the way, the neutrino, the tau. We know that tau is the name of the part of matter is tau, which is the false omega. And Venus is wormwood. So the goal of Saturn is to turn the lead planet to gold, the sun. So the demons that lost their light will be released, and dark matter is invisible light, which is gold.
That's fascinating. With the CERN, because I know you here tie it with the four angels released from the river Euphrates, but do you think that is also connected to the angel given the key to the bottomless pit, and that this is part of that key, and this is part of the release of the locust army, and and all the prophetic fulfillment of all that with the return of the Nephilim and the return of the giants that some speculate on?
I do. I think that CERN is a stargate. From my studies, there used to be one in Iraq, and I know the Phoenix flies in that area near Syria every 500 years. And so this is actually, we're right here where the prophecy is with all the war going on in Syria. Someone pointed out to me that the Syrian flag is the colors of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and I was like, wow. But yeah, I mean, the four angels are underneath, and they will be released after the demons come out with a sulfur coming out of their mouth, because those who you cannot buy or sell unless you take the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast, in my opinion, is a spiritual thing. If you do not accept Christ, you are the spirit of the Antichrist. But however, the mark of the beast is the atmosphere that CERN is going to bring into our atmosphere here, because the atmosphere above in space, above the moon, and where all the planets are, is like invisible light. It to me, it's matter. Dark matter is light we cannot see, and that's just from my studies. And so they're going to bring that into our atmosphere, which is gold. It is a gold atmosphere, invisible, done through alchemy, so to speak. And so when I think that when people make the decision to follow the beast and the Antichrist, they're going to transform into they're going to want to be their own God, just like Adam and Eve in the garden. I guess they were promised, you could be as your own gods. But the sulfur comes out of these demons' mouths, and all, the volcanoes, there's called a ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean, and that's where all the volcanoes are. And so everything above is attached with what is below. Venus is actually made out of phosphorus, and when you break down all the elements in Venus, it's basically gold. It's like an atmosphere of phosphorus from volcanoes that used to erupt. And in the translations of Venus in Revelation 8:11, it says, "And the name of the star is called wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter." Well, wormwood, if you look up the definition for that, the definition is in the Strong's Concordance is absinthe, being Artemisia. So the translation in the dictionary is basically Artemisia, which means Artemis. Artemis is Apollo's sister, which actually, you know, Apollo is a fallen angel, so he is both, and he is Apollyon, which is the Antichrist. And so if you look at it that way, then Venus pretty much translates to wormwood, with that spelling, you know, with the name of the goddess that represents that planet. So it's a possibility. I mean, what if they were trying to shoot wormwood out of the sky and pieces of it fell down and opened up the pit? You know, I really don't know how it's going to open. Anthony says that they're building toroidal fields towards the moon. The moon is Soma, it is the elixir of life, and that is where they get their illumination and their powers from. They get it from the radiance from the moon and the sun, and the way that the planets are, the way that the equinoxes are. That's how the fallen use this. But they want to build this toroidal field to be able to open up the gate. Isn't there a verse that says something about the gate? There's something holding the gate from being open, but there is going to be a point when that gate is open. The Kabbalah call it the Ta, where it's kind of like, if you know, Atlas is holding it on his head. That's the way I see it, and the gate is locked. But they want to be able to open that up, and they are doing it with elements. That's what they're doing. And they're building this toroidal field so that way they can shoot these Birkeland currents up to Saturn, and they can open up not only the portal, but they can ignite Saturn like a sun with this electricity. Because if Saturn is like a battery, right, and you shoot up that much power to it, it's going to turn on. It's going to ignite. And so that's basically what they want to do. In my opinion, and Anthony Patch's opinion, we've discussed it. That's what we understand it to be. With as far as they want to create the Big Bang. Well, the Big Bang is Mithraism. It is Mithra being birthed from the egg. It is the exact equivalent of Mithraism, and the Jupiter worship is the Ogdoad. It's the exact same thing, because that's the egg and the Ben stone and the gods being birthed from this one egg, and they are all one deity, 4 above, 4 below, and that is why they worship the 8. And the 8 symbolism is everywhere. 8 is 8 sides of the temple in Jerusalem. You know, the temple on the mount has 8 sides. The Pope wears a tall cross. The tall cross represents 4, and there's 4 hidden. When you pull it up, it makes a triangle, a pyramid. And so that's what they worship. They worship these fallen angels. This is what they worship. CERN worships these fallen angels. Vatican worships these fallen angels. They have all the symbolism with the sun and the moon in their churches. And even a lot of the Catholic churches, you see a lot of the fallen angels like Apollo and Ceres and Artemis all up inside of their domes and everything. They have statues of them everywhere, of Isis, and they had a Jupiter statue, but people complained and they took it down. And that's basically who they worship as Saturn, is Jupiter as the king of the gods. But really, in all reality, it's all of them together. But that's the main one, which is the Jupiter temples is how they worship too, through the Jupiter temples and Mithraism.
Yeah, I know that, because even in the Emerald Tablets during the time of Atlantis, it talks about how they were trying to open these portals, and they were inviting these dark entities, these fallen angelic interdimensional beings, into this time-space frame, and that I believe that was one of the reasons why Atlantis was judged and was destroyed in a flood even back then, but that they have been trying to ever since that time to replicate that whole process and to create that technology again. And Christ says in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 how, as in the days of Noah, that it would be in the same with the second coming of the Son of Man. And so we see a lot of that technology and the things that they were doing back then with the corruption of the genome, both animals and plants, the creation of hybrids, all those kind of things coming to the forefront, and these are things that are publicly acknowledged, and so we know that what they are doing in the shadows, in the recesses, where we can't see in these deep underground bases, much like the island of Dr. Moreau, that they're way in advance of what we publicly know or what they publicly disclaim, and that the kind of things that even Thomas Costello spoke about that he had been witness to in Dulce, in the Dulce base deep underground, Nightmare Hall with all these different hybrids. We've got the history as cited by Berosus, where he talks about all of these hybrid beings and creatures that were created even during the time in the Temple of Belus by the so-called Anunnaki gods. That we are absolutely in a time of weirdness, and that if the days were not shortened, there should be no flesh left, which to me means that, if Christ weren't coming to put an end to all of this practices, all of this insanity being pushed by not only the fallen angels, but those that are loyal to them in, performing these kind of atrocities and these kind of experiments, that certainly it would result and lead to the death of us all in some way. And that's one of the reasons why he would have to return in the manner that he did to put a stop to this, much as the flood did during the time of Noah's day in creating basically a restart to humanity and allowing Noah and his bloodline, him being pure in his generations, to repopulate and begin things again, and that even the millennial reign will be a repeat of that kind of thing. But comment, and also know that we're just a minute out from another break, and then we'll
Okay.
finish up on this.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that, and then before I forget, I wanted to say that the gates. Every planet has a gate, um, and above is below. The abyss is not Tartarus. Is not only just Saturn. CERN is built like 300 feet under the ground because alchemy is different when you do it underneath that far under the ground. And so these beings, they travel by light. And so, in this energy, just like with Atlantis, with all that energy where they had certain areas, what they use with that energy so that way they could open the portal. So I think that we're not going to see these things coming down from outer space. I don't think. I don't know if we're going to see them coming up underneath the ground or from above. But yeah, in the days of Noah's, men's heart will fail for what they see, and it is going to be like that.
Yeah, absolutely. These are some crazy times, and I think that we're going to be witness to a lot of things that to us cannot be made sense of, and that a lot of the powers, the principalities, the wickedness in high places, these spiritual powers, all that will manifest in this coming age. All right, we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I have as guest with me Kris Deleon. There's a portion of the Emerald Tablets that says this: "In the form of man, they amongst us, but only to sight were they as are men. serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, and taking forms that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdom, and taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered, only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of the shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. But know ye the masters were mighty in magic, able to lift the veil from the face of the serpent, able to send him back in his place. Came they to man and taught him the secret, the word that only a man can pronounce. Swift then they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him forth from his place among men. This last part, talking about the sound, only by sound could the veil be lifted, and could they see this particular being. The reason I bring this up is because a person in the chat room wanted to ask you, doesn't sound seem to play a role in this somehow? And so,
Oh,
can you comment on that?
yeah, you mean with CERN?
Yeah, CERN,
Yeah,
anything.
CERN is there. Yeah, a sound and vibration, just like
Yes.
Thoth when he was a baboon and he made the sound to the moon, and there was something magical that happened during that time. But yes, there's you know, there's frequencies of every planet, and everything is from sound and vibration, because when the Egyptians traveled on their boat. They had to be in perfect harmony with each other in order to make a certain sound to be able to go through to the other dimension. And I know that the gods used gold to go through dimensions. It had to be powdered gold. You have to know a lot about alchemy in order to break down gold, just like Moses did in the river when he broke down the gold and the people drank it. You have to understand how to break those elements down even further to make it this powder form for people to be able to travel into other dimensions and stuff. But yeah, harmony plays a different sound. Each planet makes a sound through their elements too, like crystals. The lapis lazuli represents Mercury, but they also represent different crystals, just like lead can become crystallized, just like Saturn's rings are made out of crystal. And that's how sound resonates through these planets, like harmony. I imagine it like a beautiful harmony before the angels fell. It must have been magnificent and beautiful, and the harmony was probably amazing during that time. And before Adam and Eve fell, I'm sure that it's so amazing beyond what we can understand before they fell into the flesh. And so, yeah, I do know that harmony plays a role in that, because CERN is a harmony machine as well. And I'm so glad they brought that up, because CERN is a musical instrument. It is also, whenever when Enlil was the god of Nippur, in order for him to come down from the sky, from his throne up high, they would have to speak every language, uh, and he had to hear all the languages from everyone at one time in order for him to come. And so, if you look at CERN, and they have glass plates with every language on them, and there's light beams going through these languages in order to call these fallen angels. And also, it does make music and vibration. And some music and vibration can be silent. There's all kinds of frequencies going on around us all the time that we cannot hear, but we can sense that it's there. I mean, some people's ears ring because there's such high frequencies around us. The frequency on our earth is not what it used to be. It's different because of what they've done with all of the Wi-Fi and all of the connection and the frequency around us, most people notice that it is different. It's not the same anymore. But yeah, I do believe that sound is something. God used sound to create the earth. He used his voice, which we don't even understand what it could possibly sound like. And so I do think that has everything to do with everything with sound, because if you think of quantum entanglement and Lucifer being the mind of quantum entanglement and the false ascension, and with the sound resonating through the crystal pyramids that go underneath the water of the sea. There's two giant crystal pyramids in where the Bermuda Triangle is, and when they used to do the rising of their god ceremony, like in India, sorry, I forgot what it's called, but they would tie the serpent around the mountain, and the water, they would churn the sea. Well, this is what they would do in the Milky Way. There would be like a churning of the sea, and the sound would vibrate and resonate through those crystals in order for them to accomplish what they were doing to get the elixir of life. And they couldn't let any of it spill, because if it did, the demons could get it and they could take over. And that was, how they did this churning of the sea. You can look it up online. When the gods of India, they would do the churning of the sea ceremonies, and they have the same gods as in Egypt with the four faces, the two faces. They're the same thing, with Brahma and Vishnu and Saturn and Jupiter, Enlil and Inky, and the two-faced god that they have. I think his name is, I forgot his name. Osimu, I think, is one of his names. And so you have these same exact gods in every, in Samaria, Egypt, India. They're the same. They're the same, except they're in different timelines and different cultures, and they're being taught by the same fallen angels, just like CERN is. And one thing I wanted to say too is you were reading that earlier about the hybrids and and the days of Noah. Like, that's what's going to happen during this time. And I also wanted to say that sulfur, I don't know if you've heard of this, but I have. I was in ministry, and I've heard lots of pastors talk about when they rebuke demons out of people and they smell sulfur. They can smell it.
Right.
And hell supposedly smells like sulfur, and the hybrids are different from the fallen angels. The ones that were mated and they were birthed in flesh are different from the fallen angels that actually fell. They are still in their element, but the gold that they would do through alchemy, only certain of the hierarchy, because there's different levels of angels, like armies, and only the higher ones, like the phoenixes, they're called the phoenixes, they and the archangels, they're the only ones that would understand. And whoever, there's a lot of people throughout history that have looked for the immortality. They've looked for the elixir of life, but only the fallen angels understand that gold, lead to gold, and the sulfur, and able to go through different dimensions. Like Thoth, he could go through the fourth dimension and travel. And a lot of the gods back then could do that. And if you look up the blue-eyed gods, the reason their eyes are blue is because of the gold that they would inhale in the atmosphere and able to transform and go into other dimensions. And I've read different blogs and listened to different shows about CERN turning lead into gold. I myself don't understand that, if that's exactly what they're doing. I've never been able to confirm that, but lead, it makes sense to me, because lead into gold is what the goal has always been since ancient history. So
Yeah, all of that is very interesting, and the way that they use alchemy, that's some things that we don't necessarily understand. The whole thing with the philosopher's stone and the things that they have been doing through, as far as the Masons. There's been great interest in alchemy and transmutation of elements and the whole philosopher's stone, things like that, that they've been trying to succeed in accomplishing for a very long time. And there's aspects to all of that that we don't understand, even like with what you were talking about with the different elements that are being used by CERN. Um, is it a progression? Is it a progression? They keep doing all of these experiments. Are they reaching a certain level, then adding a whole nother element? And is that fusing something or creating something new so that they can, you know, take it up a whole nother level? Who really even knows what they're trying to accomplish? But it is definitely my opinion that all that has part to play with the stargates, the portals, the return of the Nephilim, the release of the angels, those from Euphrates and Dudael, and um, you know, it's these are definitely fascinating times. But um, we've got about 12 minutes remaining. So before we continue, can you give out your website contact information, where people can go to find your work again, and then the last 12 minutes, just anything that you want to cover, anything that you want to share as far as story, what you find relevant to warn the people about, or just want to discuss in the last few minutes.
Okay, yeah, you can find our website at endtimesmatrixnews.com. And then our Google Plus is End Times Matrix News, and also our YouTube channel with Tim. And Tim is almost done with his booklet that we're working on, and the star aspect, because it's very interesting with the swastika, because Ursa Major, when it spins around to during the time, the time changes and the equinoxes, there's four. It spins around like a swastika, and it goes to the Pleiades, and and then it goes to the Orion's belt and the Sirius. Sirius is the Hopi star; it's the blue Kachina, and actually Sirius translates into Shiva. Shiva represents the seven planets also, and it's Cernunnos is proto Shiva. So Orion actually represents an axe. It also represents the sun and the moon energy. There's a connection there in the belt of Orion that goes over the Giza pyramids. So those are some of the things that we're putting in there. And then I'm also working on incredible research with symbolism all over the world with like the Boston bombing. They had the unicorn as a symbolism for that race, and for the marathon that they did. And then there's a lot of connections with the unicorn, with representing Horus, which is represents the Antichrist to the elite. That's who they worship. I mean, I know they worship Ptah too. It's a very complex thing, but Horus is, if you know the story about the two eyes of Horus, I'm going to put that together. It's the hunt for the unicorn, and the unicorn representing the Antichrist, and how it connects with the star system and being birthed in the center of that triangle. The triangle represents time and space, and that's what the Freemasons use. And the ladder is the Milky Way on the Freemasons board, and it goes up to the star Sirius, which is the blue star, which is in our dimension. And then the red star, which is the other star that rotates around it. It was a red star, but it turned white. That one is in the sixth dimension. So these stars are very important, and they're connected. There's a guy, Roberts, I forgot his first name. He wrote a book, and he had the CIA in the United States contact him a lot and tell him stop talking about Sirius. They didn't want him talking about that, just like the Vatican does not want people talking about wormwood, because that's one of the biggest projects of the Vatican is wormwood. And NASA doesn't want people talking about the pole shift. There is a possible pole shift that's going to be happening, and that's what happened during the time of the flood.
And
So
we're
it does
talking
make a
about
lot
the
of sense.
Lucifer telescope, right?
Yes, yes, the Lucifer telescope that the Vatican owns in Arizona. Yeah.
And so,
So they're looking at stuff we can't see with our naked eye.
right. The Qumran Bible speaks of the return of the destroyer, and the destroyer is speculated that it's the same thing. The return of Planet X or Nibiru or what the Bible speaks about as wormwood, that all of this could be the same entity or the same, cosmic body. What's your take on all that? And is that what is predicted to be to have part in the unveiling of prophecy at the end of days, with the wrath of God being poured out on the wicked or those not written into the book of life?
Well, that's something that Tim's putting in the book too, with the gates of hell that cannot prevail. He's putting that information in the book, and it's so good. What he talks about with CERN building this to open this portal so that way they can try to prevail against Christ, because Jesus already won. He's already won the battle, and so we know that these things are coming, and so they are going to open a gate. I do, in my opinion, I believe that wormwood is Venus because of the alchemy that I've looked into, because of the translations of the name. Just all of my studies represent Saturn, but all the planets actually do, because they are one body. So if you turn the Kabbalah tree sideways, it's the signature of Saturn. The Vatican carries that same signature around on a pole, which is gold, and he wears the Star of Venus on his head. And the Star of Venus represents 5. It represents, chaos, and so I do believe that Shiva represents 7. And so I think that it's a combination of a lot of things. It's a very complex thing, but I do think that the Bible says those that are sealed by God, the demons can't touch them because we belong to Him. So,
Right. Well, just a couple comments real quick from the chat room. Link says, "Thank you for extremely well informed, intelligent guests." Speaking of you, Kris. And also, Blues Girl says, "Thanks for your work, Kris. Been following you and Tim for a while. Bless you both. And have Kris send our love and blessings to Anthony." And one final comment, she says that they also shut down Immanuel Velikovsky's work on the electric universe. So I wanted to ask you,
wow.
you said that they were trying to ignite Saturn. I know that we only have like 5 minutes remaining, but why would they do that? What is the purpose of that, if that is indeed what they are trying to do?
Because that's their link. Before the flood, they used to worship Saturn, and then Jupiter is the resurrected Saturn, the king of the gods. He represents the electricity, the lightning. But it is because they have to have that aspect. That's why you see the sun and the moon worship over time, and that is why they worship Saturn. But then after the flood, then it became moon worship, and that they came through Ptah and Khonsu and Amon, which is Jupiter. So they need that aspect. Saturn was put in to the underworld, the netherworld, and it is Tartarus. And so it used to be a star. It used to be to me, I think it's a dwarf star. And I think that it was ignited in a star at one point, and they worship this as their sun, and they want their sun back, and led to gold, just like with the chakras and the ascension, the lead all the way up to the mind, which is gold, led to gold. And it's the same thing, but in a bigger, looking at it as a bigger scale. They want their sun, they want their energy, they want the golden age again. They want the Stargate Atlantis. They want this to happen so that way they can be their own gods and be in this element.
Huh. It's interesting how that connects to all that. But do you know about the work of Troy McLaughlin and how he's got a website called Saturn Death Cult, and he does a lot of research on Saturn?
Yeah, I've not really read a whole lot, but yeah, I've come across his website and read some of it. Yeah,
He might be an
doing my
interesting.
research. So
Yeah, he might be an interesting guest for y'all sometime. Let me know.
okay.
I've interviewed him here a couple times. Um, that might be something that would be beneficial for each of you. But we've got 3 minutes remaining, Chris. I'm going to give you a chance for a final comment. Anything of that you'd like to share with the listening audience?
Yeah, I just want everyone to know that, God is bigger than all of these things. And he is, even the word of God says that, when the abyss is open, which it is going to open, I don't know if we're going to be here or not, but I know that we should trust God 100%. With all of our heart, and because his understanding is far greater than ours, and we are to go to him for all things. And I do know that he's in control no matter what, and we're not to fear. He didn't give us a spirit of fear, so we're just to trust him in all things. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree in that no matter what happens, because a lot of people say, well, if you know all these things are coming, why are you still in the United States? Why don't you leave? And my whole thing is that no matter where I am, I'm totally okay, and I'm not worried about anything because I know that the Most High has me, and so if something is supposed to happen, it will. But I feel I'm protected to embrace new perspective. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I'm honored to have as guest with me Kris Deleon, and she does a show on End Times Matrix News with my friend Tim Clark, and she's going to join us for the next 2 hours and cover all things esoteric. She's done a number of really incredible interviews with a lot of very well respected and informative and well diverse and well knowledgeable people on a lot of incredible topics. And so we're going to pick her brain this evening and kind of talk about the things that have been intriguing us all as far as alternative truth and current events. And Chris, I don't know if you saw just recently, there was an attack in California where 14 people were killed and 17 people hurt. But it seems like, and I know probably you've been saying the same, but that all of the open borders and government sponsoring terrorists and all of that is coming home to roost now. And it's my opinion that we're going to be seeing more of that kind of thing happening in this country and others, because they they want this kind of thing. I saw also that they're going door to door, and even after the Paris attacks, they were going door to door. And even if people did not want the military or the police to enter their home, they had no choice. They were basically forcing their way in and searching and turning every corner to find whatever they were looking for. And it's my opinion also that they're going to be using that kind of thing as excuse to invade people's private properties and private abodes. Kris, you there, sister?
yes, I am.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
well, did you have a comment on what I
Oh
just?
yeah, yeah. And if you hear noise in the background, I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries.
I do. It is very evident that they do want to take our guns, and Even Obama said the other day that he is planning on doing an executive order to do so. So I do believe that that is the purpose, to bring all, the refugees over here to turn, the United States of America eventually into a third world country type where they could take full control in the New World Order. But I do see that coming. I do see the gun control coming. I see all the gun hoax, that are happening, and it seems like there's one every day now, and so yeah, I think that's part of the plan, for the United Nations to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, the people that claim to be fighting the terrorists, that in large part, the governments, shadow governments specifically, that they're funding them and that they utilize them as the boogeyman, whenever they need a jack in the box to pop its little head and make itself visible, that they can call up these fanatical whoever, whether it's Christians or Muslims or whatever fringe group they've trained and have
Yeah,
sponsored. For whatever country, there's always a different kind of terrorist, a different kind of definition to terror, but that they utilize that in order to further their agenda, whether it's to increase the budget for more radical martial law measures and, give the police a greater power and authority and equipment for oppressing the people. And yeah, I think one of the things to get access to our guns, gun control, because we do have a well-armed citizenry, and there's increasing consciousness as far as knowledge of truth occurring, even though there's still so many that are asleep. Though it was only 5% of the population that even was involved in the Revolutionary War, and so we don't need everybody to wake up, and every person that gains knowledge and insight about what's really truly going on can make a really big and empowered difference. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you and I do what we do, in order to reach those that are seeking answer and to give guidance, to provide direction for those that are really inquisitive on these kind of things.
yeah. Well, my heart is into that, to tell the truth and to get people to wake up because God woke me up
Right.
and, shook me to the core. And I was literally sitting there going, what in the world is God trying to tell me? And so all these things started happening, crazy things in my life and just a lot of things. And I started searching for answers. And that's when I met Tim with End Times Matrix News. So actually, this is the third year that we've been doing radio shows. We've done a lot of radio shows, and then we did Google Hangouts, and then we met Anthony Patch. He became a part of our team for a little bit, and we had an incident to where our channel got shut down, and we had to do everything over again. And then, so we're still in.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Comfortable in deceit and the convenience of routine, most reject truth even when confronted by it. People do not like being told that they've been bamboozled, especially by those systems or people they have invested trust within. Few will latch on to anything that challenges or contradicts foundational belief, choosing to cling to false illusion, so long as either it is majority opinion or somebody they admire perpetuates lie. Fewer are even willing to embrace change, and having no real concern for truth, will not put forth the least bit of effort to its discovery. Most have tendency to lash out immediately against anything or anyone that challenges what they think they already know. Many disregard truth as meaningless until it affects them directly, and even then, it is a monumental task to change mindsets.
Touch with Anthony. He's a really good friend, and when he's not too busy, he's going to come back and we're going to have some more discussions. But yeah, I mean, that's how it all started for me because, as someone that is a follower of Christ, someone who did, learn the word in church and then, doing evangelism and all those things. And then God literally wakes you up to other things and you're like, wow, I thought I was already woke up. I was already saved and I thought I was already awake. But no, it was really a rude awakening to realize what was going on in the world because, first I started saying, okay, well, I heard the New World Order. What is that? How long has that been saying? Who's been saying that and how long have they been saying it? And, what is the occult and what is the Jesuit and how is this tower built and who's the top elite? And, then I started researching everything, secret government projects, Montauk, Project Bluebeam, Majestic 12, Area 51. And, and I started putting all these things together and I said, well, how does this fit in the Bible? How does the Bible fit in with all of this that's going on? And it all comes down to bloodlines, DNA, and ancient history. And so I dug all the way back to as far as that I could. I'm sure that it goes way back farther, like you said, but I dug really far and started my research in ancient Egypt, and actually I've read about Egypt for the last few years, pretty in depthly, and I have 200 charts and studied the bloodlines, and I actually uncovered a lot of people in the Bible and what their names actually are, and it's quite interesting. It makes a lot of sense because when you understand the symbolism of the UK and Scotland and America, and the bloodlines and Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh,